I knew something was wrong when I walked into the break room and heard the new VP say, "Why do we still have dinosaurs who think paper trails matter in 2024? They were all laughing. Her, that fresh MBA she hired straight from LinkedIn, and her nephew who probably thinks DCAA is a boy band. They didn't even stop when I stepped in. I just grabbed my coffee, black as usual, and smiled the way you do when you're calculating how long it'll take for a federal audit to burn this place down. The name's Walter Garrison. I'm 49, been at this game for 18 years, and before that, I spent 6 years in the Air Force making sure cargo planes didn't fall out of the sky because someone forgot to dot an I. My binders could vaporize this company. I've spent nearly 2 decades in that basement office next to the boiler room, quietly building the legal backbone of this defense contractor like some kind of federal architect. Every contract we've landed with the Defense Department, FEMA, and the Pentagon has my signature somewhere in the digital chain. Was the registered contracting officer for every file that matters. I know the federal audit cycles like I know the pothole in the parking lot that's claimed 4 tires and a district manager's dignity. I've memorized regulation numbers like baseball stats from my childhood. I know how to fold a compliance waiver so tight it looks like origami made by monks. But none of that matters in a company where your value's measured in PowerPoint animations and your fate gets decided over craft cocktails at networking events. So I kept quiet, like always. That was my job. The invisible backbone holding everything together while flashier people took credit for the structure. Listen, if you're into tales where smug nepotism gets throat punched by red tape and karma shows up with a clipboard, you're in the right place. This isn't some fantasy revenge story. This is what happens when you mess with federal compliance and think the rules don't apply to you. I've been running defense contracts since 2006, back when we didn't even have a digital portal, just a fax machine that jammed every Tuesday and a filing cabinet that doubled as a coffee table. I built the entire federal readiness program by hand, line by line, regulation by regulation. Trained 3 of our 5 department heads. I once caught a procurement error before it nuked a $2 million disbursement and didn't even get a thank you email. What I got was Walt's always reliable, like I was office equipment myself. Not flashy, not fun, just there. Always there when the Pentagon called asking questions nobody else could answer. Always there when auditors showed up unannounced. Always there when some hotshot executive nearly tanked a contract by ignoring federal protocol. I knew where the bodies were buried in our compliance history. Hell, I dug half the graves myself when previous executives made mistakes. Our last 2 CEOs left me alone because they understood one fundamental truth. Federal compliance is like plumbing. You don't notice it until the sewage hits the carpet, and then you really wish you'd treated your plumber better. But new money doesn't want plumbers. They want disruption. They want sleek dashboards and compliance innovation. Enter Sophia Blackstone, VP of Strategic Operations or some corporate nonsense like that. Loud, polished, daddy's money written all over her Harvard MBA. Used to work in consulting, which means she thinks federal protocol is just another process to optimize with the right methodology. First week, she made jokes about unclogging bureaucratic arteries. Second week, she toured my office and called it the archive. I said nothing, just nodded and let her feel like a queen inspecting the peasants. It wasn't personal at first. I'd seen this before. Someone new trying to mark territory, prove they belonged in the corner office. Most of them burn out by quarter 3 when they realize the Pentagon doesn't care about synergy or best practices or any of the buzzwords they learned in business school. The federal government operates on one principle: follow the rules exactly as written, or face consequences that will ruin your career. But Sophia had something worse than ignorance. She had ambition backed by family money and connections. That's lethal in my line of work. You mess up a supply chain invoice on a defense logistics contract and soldiers don't get boots or ammunition on time. You screw up a designation log and suddenly you've got an open file with no legal authority holding the pen, which means everything stops until someone fixes the paperwork. But Sophia didn't get that, or didn't care. She started small, took over status calls, renamed file folders, asked for read-only access to my systems. Then came the team memos about compliance modernization and removing bottlenecks and real-time decision frameworks. Corporate speak for getting rid of anyone who might slow down her meteoric rise. I was still doing the same work, still filing reports, still answering calls from federal agencies, but I could feel the air changing. People stopped copying me on emails that used to automatically include me. Procurement started using templates I'd never seen, formatted by someone who clearly didn't understand federal requirements. My portal access got temporarily suspended for system updates that seemed to take longer each week. The writing was on the wall, written in MBA jargon and family privilege. But I kept my head down and did my job because that's what you do when you're a professional. You don't start office drama, you don't file complaints, you document everything and wait for people to hang themselves with their own incompetence. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast or so publicly or with such spectacular stupidity that it would trigger automatic federal oversight. But that's getting ahead of the story. Then one Tuesday morning I walked into the quarterly review and my name wasn't on the agenda. My title was gone. In its place, Austin Blackstone, Acting Contract Officer. Austin Blackstone, Sophia's 24-year-old nephew with a business degree and about as much understanding of federal compliance as a golden retriever has of quantum physics. I looked around the conference room. HR was nodding like bobbleheads on a dashboard. Legal looked half asleep, probably still recovering from whatever corporate retreat they'd attended last weekend. I asked when the transition paperwork had gone through. Sophia smiled that MBA smile and said, "Oh, we streamlined that last week. You're still in the loop, just not the official gatekeeper anymore. You are cleared for federal work, right?" I could have thrown my coffee mug through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Instead, I took a sip. It tasted like burnt pennies and career suicide, but I didn't protest. I didn't escalate. I didn't even correct her obvious attempt to question my clearance status. I just smiled because I knew something she didn't. Something that would make that smug tone stick in her throat like a fishbone swallowed sideways. See, removing a federally registered contracting officer without proper reassignment triggers a compliance clock. Tick, tick. And that clock doesn't care about your family connections, or your Harvard MBA, or your plans to disrupt the defense contracting industry. The meeting was supposed to be routine. 30 minutes of buzzwords and pie charts, then back to real work. But the moment Sophia strutted in with her sleeves rolled up and that air of someone who thinks rules are merely suggestions for lesser people, I knew we were in for a sermon about innovation and modernization. She started with a phrase that made me want to staple my own hand to the conference table. "We need to disrupt our own ecosystem before someone else does." Sweet Jesus. I glanced around the room. Procurement looked confused, like they'd walked into the wrong meeting. Legal was checking email on their phones. Austin was nodding like his neck was spring-loaded, trying to look engaged and executive. I sipped my coffee, decaf, doctor's orders after my last physical, and waited for the inevitable disaster. Then she said it. Just tossed it out there like a live grenade in a daycare center. "Walt's not even current on federal protocols anymore, so we'll be transitioning that whole oversight process to fresh perspective." Silence. Dead, uncomfortable silence. My coffee was mid-swallow when that landed. I had to force it down so I wouldn't choke in front of 15 people. That would have been her dream headline. Legacy Compliance Dinosaur Chokes on Own Irrelevance During Strategic Innovation Meeting. I turned to her, keeping my voice level and professional. "Actually, my clearance is current through 2026. It renews every 24 months and requires a federal background check, which, judging by your LinkedIn posts about disrupting government inefficiency, you'd probably struggle with on the attitude assessment alone." The room went dead quiet. Someone's pen stopped clicking. Austin blinked so hard his wireless earbuds shifted in his ears. Sophia laughed too loud, too quick, the kind of laugh people use when they're caught saying something stupid and want to pretend it was intentional. "Sure, but that's just paperwork, right? What we need is fresh energy, modern thinking, not dusty military manuals and processes that haven't been updated since the Cold War." She clicked her presentation remote, bringing up a slide labeled Modernization Phase 1. My name was nowhere on it. The compliance process, our entire compliance process that I'd built from scratch, was reduced to a single bullet point: eliminate legacy gatekeepers and streamline approval workflows. That's when I understood this wasn't about efficiency or modernization. It was about elimination. She wanted me gone, and she wanted Austin in my position, and she thought federal contracting worked like a corporate reshuffling where you could just reassign titles and move on. I'd seen people like Sophia before during my Air Force days, fast-talking, over-credentialed officers who thought regulations were obstacles to overcome rather than safeguards to protect mission-critical operations. They usually learned the hard way that military precision exists for good reasons, often after their shortcuts caused expensive mistakes or put people at risk. But this was worse than military incompetence. This was civilian arrogance combined with family privilege, and that combination is toxic in federal contracting. They think a regulation is a suggestion, a checklist is optional, and that defense contracts operate like software subscriptions where you can just update terms and conditions whenever convenient. Later that afternoon, I checked the internal registry system. Sure enough, my name had been removed as registered contracting officer from the $350 million defense logistics file. In its place, Austin Blackstone, acting. Acting indeed, like a kid wearing his father's uniform and pretending he knows how to fly the plane. No federal reassignment form, no notification to the Defense Contract Audit Agency, no portal update through proper channels. Just a sloppy internal switch like this was a holiday schedule rotation and not a binding contract subject to Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations. She thought it was office politics, a simple personnel change. But I'd spent 18 years building a fortress of protocols so airtight that even our legal team used my documentation for training new hires. And now this amateur had wandered into the control room with a sledgehammer, smashing systems she didn't understand. I stared at the computer screen, reading the change notification twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I took a screenshot for my records. Then I pulled out the hard copy files, the original signed officer designation form from when the contract was first awarded, my signature, legal's approval, the CEO's authorization. All properly filed, all legally binding, and now nobody had officially replaced me. Not through federal channels, not according to DCAA requirements, which meant the file was in legal limbo, non-compliant and under automatic audit risk. Austin had no idea what he'd just inherited, neither did Sophia. But I did, and I was about to educate them both. I took a deep breath, then opened the Federal Contractor Registry portal. It's not flashy, that portal. Pale blue interface, font stuck in 2009, but it has teeth. Real, sharp, bureaucratic teeth that can tear apart a company's federal contracts faster than a congressional hearing. I submitted a change notification. Dry language, factual, emotionless, just law. Contracting officer of record removed internally without corresponding federal reassignment. Please advise on compliance verification per subsection 4.3b. Once submitted, it logged the timestamp. Then I printed it, stapled it to the signed designation form, and filed both in a new folder labeled Sophia's Education. Then I waited. The thing about federal processes, they're like pressure cookers. Quiet at first, building slowly, but eventually something starts pressurizing and nobody knows it's about to explode until it does. The formal email came at 4:23 p.m. on a Friday because cowardice prefers inboxes over face-to-face confrontation. Subject line, internal reassignment, contract oversight, access update. No greeting, no context, just corporate doublespeak from HR. Per recent organizational realignment, your CO designation has been transitioned to Austin Blackstone. Please direct all oversight-related queries to strategic operations going forward. They even attached a PDF titled Compliance Realignment FAQ. I opened it with the kind of morbid curiosity you feel watching a train wreck in slow motion. First bullet point. Q. Is this a demotion? A. No. This is strategic streamlining of operational roles to better align with modernization initiatives. Translation. We didn't want to deal with you anymore, so we're pretending this is progress. That night I stayed late, not because I had work to finish. Austin had already been given most of my active caseload to prove his fresh perspective on defense procurement. I stayed to document everything. It's what we do in the military. When something goes sideways, you write it down. Every detail, every timestamp, every conversation that might matter later. I clicked through the portal using my downgraded credentials. I couldn't even access revision histories for contracts I'd built from scratch over the past decade. Security levels I'd designed personally, chain of custody signatures I'd implemented by hand, internal-external sync protocols I'd written during late nights and weekend overtime, and now I couldn't see my own digital footprints. I went to pull one of the hard copy contracts from the compliance archive. my archive that I'd organized with military precision, and found the entire shelf boxed and relocated. A yellow sticky note on the empty space read, Austin, team review in progress, no email notification, no heads-up call. Just erased like I'd never existed. It wasn't professional transition, it was institutional vandalism. I drove home that night and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes. Engine running, NPR talking about some ethics hearing in Washington. I didn't get emotional. Stopped doing that after the divorce 3 years ago when I learned that feelings don't fix problems. Action does. But I did close my eyes and imagine walking away from it all. Let Sophia sign her little forms and watch Austin trip over acronyms until the government froze their assets and shut down operations. But I didn't walk away. I'd filed that compliance notice. It had started something fundamental in the federal machinery. Not loud, not flashy, but it had triggered a clock that couldn't be stopped or reset or negotiated with. You see, when a federal contract has a named officer, me, and that person gets removed without official reassignment filed and accepted by the appropriate agency, the contract enters what's called pending oversight review. Not sexy terminology, but devastating in practice because all payments, deliverables, even routine communications under that contract become provisional pending resolution. The $350 million logistics deal suddenly had no registered handler. That's like flying a military cargo plane with no licensed pilot on the flight manifest. Everyone's buckled in, confident about the mission, and the cockpit's empty. I checked the Federal Registry the next morning. There it was, in black and white. Contracting Officer of Record, Austin Blackstone, pending. That single word, pending, meant everything and nothing. Not accepted, not recognized, not authorized. Just pending, like a mortgage application or a security clearance that might never get approved. Austin had submitted the name change without filing federal reassignment paperwork through proper channels. He didn't know you can't just swap names like updating a phone contact. You need agency vetting, background verification, clearance validation. Half the time it takes weeks just to get temporary designation approved, assuming the candidate meets minimum requirements. But Austin thought he could wing it, probably clicked a drop-down menu in some internal system and figured he was ready to manage hundreds of millions in defense spending. So now he had a $350 million contract sitting under voided oversight. No officer, no authority, just a 24-year-old with a business degree and confidence that exceeded his competence by several orders of magnitude. And me? I stayed quiet. Took my access downgrade, my new desk near the copy machine, and waited. They wanted to erase me from their modernization story. Fine. You can white out a name from an org chart, but you can't white out a timestamp from federal records. The night I found the specific regulation, the building was empty except for the security guard humming some old Johnny Cash song in the lobby. My monitor glowed like a confessional in the dark, lines of federal code bleeding across my tired eyes. I was buried deep in the Defense Contract Audit Agency database, navigating the driest cemetery of government text you'll ever encounter. When I found subsection 4.3b, I sat back like I'd discovered buried treasure. A procedural clause so obscure that even experienced legal teams rarely referenced it. If a contracting officer is removed from an active federal contract without immediate federal reassignment, the contract enters automatic audit review within 7 business days. There it was, my justice, my weapon, my quiet bureaucratic guillotine sharpened by decades of regulatory precision. I didn't need satisfaction or gloating, just the stillness of precision. Austin had tripped a silent alarm and the clock was ticking. I didn't need to shout or rally allies or start office drama. The rules were already sharpening themselves on his arrogance. I opened a new file. Audit trigger documentation. Then another. Access revocation log. I started filling them with the kind of detail that would make a DCAA auditor weep tears of joy. Timestamps, revision histories, IP addresses from every login that revoked my clearance. Every move Austin made left breadcrumbs in the compliance matrix, and I was mapping them like a cartographer of institutional doom. At 8:45 p.m., I logged into the federal contractor portal one more time. The login screen still greeted me by name. Welcome, Walter Garrison. Clearance level, verified. That little word verified might as well have been a golden badge. Even though the company stripped my internal title, the Federal Registry hadn't processed my removal. In their eyes, I was still the contracting officer of record. That was all I needed. I navigated to change notifications, selected the $350 million logistics contract, and started typing. My fingers moved like I was conducting a symphony of bureaucratic vengeance. The form didn't ask for emotion or opinion, it asked for precision, and that was my native language after 18 years of federal compliance. Internal reassignment executed without accompanying federal notification or clearance reassignment, requesting compliance verification and audit review per subsection 4.3b. I reviewed it 3 times. Attached supporting documents, the HR email, portal screenshots, time-stamped access logs. Then, before hitting submit, I added one more note. Short, factual, lethal. As of this filing, contract currently lacks authorized oversight officer. Click. Submit. The timestamp blinked onto the screen. 2107 EST, acknowledged, review cycle initiated. Just like that, it was out of my hands and into the machine. The machine that doesn't play favorites, doesn't care about family connections, and doesn't know what disruption means. Federal systems may be slow to start, but when they move, they crush everything in their path. 3 days after I filed the compliance trigger, Austin sent a company-wide email with the subject line, Compliance Reimagined, a New Era. I nearly choked on my protein bar reading that header. Compliance isn't interpretive dance. It's not a corporate reboot. It's a stack of rules older than his entire education, and one misfiled form can bring down a billion-dollar contract faster than an inspector general with whistleblower testimony. But there he was, patting himself on the back like he'd just reinvented federal procurement. I clicked it open, coffee in hand, eyebrows already raised in anticipation of the disaster. Effective immediately, the Compliance Division will operate under an agile structure designed to reduce redundancy and accelerate approvals. This change reflects our commitment to lean practices and federal innovation. Federal innovation. Good Lord, he went on, bullet point after corporate buzzword, listing all the ways he'd gutted the department, reduced gatekeeping roles, consolidated oversight redundancies, implemented AI-driven contract workflows, which I'm 99% sure means he had an intern create a spreadsheet with conditional formatting. And the cherry on top, special thanks to Walter Garrison for his years of service. We wish him continued success in his new support role. Support role. Like I was backup vocals to his federal boy band. I didn't reply. Didn't even blink. Because about 5 minutes after that email hit everyone's inbox, another email landed in mine. This one not from Austin, not from HR, not from anyone in our little corporate circus. No, this one came from a .gov address. Subject line, audit review triggered. Notification of impending compliance assessment. I clicked it open and my heart rate didn't even flicker. Per subsection 4.3b, this contract has been flagged for review following removal of registered contracting officer without federal reassignment. Unannounced audit pending. Prepare documentation accordingly. Short, cold, government issued to its core. But to me, it read like poetry. I exhaled slowly and leaned back in my chair. The kind of lean you do when you've just checkmated someone who thought the game hadn't even started. It was a Tuesday morning. No warning, no courtesy call from legal, no security desk whispering that someone from the government just signed in. Just 3 people in gray suits stepping off the elevator like they'd been summoned by federal ritual. 2 DCAA auditors and 1 compliance enforcement agent, all carrying black portfolios like execution warrants wrapped in leather. They didn't look around or ask for directions, just marched to the conference room with the kind of authority you can't fake, buy, or inherit through family connections. And let me tell you, Sophia had spent her whole career trying to do all 3. I was already at my desk finishing my morning documentation routine and sipping burnt coffee when I got the Slack notification. Did you know we have federal auditors in the building? Oh, honey, I knew. The audit clock had hit 0 right on schedule. Sophia found out about it the same way she finds out most things. Late, loud, and completely unprepared. I watched from my corner as she power walked past my desk, face like someone trying to remember if they'd left classified documents on their kitchen counter. Her blazer was wrinkled. No confident stride, just controlled panic wearing expensive shoes. She burst into the conference room like it was her personal boardroom. I followed behind, quiet as smoke. The auditors were already seated, portfolios open, pens ready. No small talk, no pleasantries, no corporate warm-up chit-chat. The lead agent, a compact woman with a face carved from granite and a badge clipped to her suit like a weapon, didn't even look up when Sophia entered. Sophia slapped her palms on the conference table. "Welcome! Bit of a surprise visit, but we love surprises. Keeps everyone sharp, right?" Nobody laughed. Not even Austin, who usually giggles at anything that might be construed as executive humor. The granite-faced agent finally spoke. "We're here to review documentation and oversight compliance related to federal contract DLS 35024. And that's when Sophia realized her Harvard MBA hadn't prepared her for this conversation. You could see it in her eyes. The exact moment she understood that federal auditors don't negotiate, don't accept excuses, and don't care about your modernization initiatives. Sometimes the best revenge is just doing your job right while watching other people fail spectacularly at theirs. Sophia slapped her palms on the conference table. "Welcome! Bit of a surprise visit, but we love surprises. Keeps everyone sharp, right?" Nobody laughed. Not even Austin, who usually giggles at anything that might be construed as executive humor. The granite-faced agent finally spoke. "We're here to review documentation and oversight compliance related to federal contract DLS 35024. Sophia nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. Austin here has been managing that beautifully. We've streamlined the entire process." The agent opened her portfolio. "And who completed the federal reassignment paperwork when Mr. Garrison was removed from this contract?" Silence. Austin's thumb started that nervous tapping again. "Well," Sophia said, "we have all the internal documentation. HR processed everything through our systems. That's not what I asked." The agent's voice could have cut steel. "I need to see Federal Form SF-1402, the Official Contracting Officer Reassignment Request, filed with DCAA within 5 business days of the personnel change." Austin leaned forward. "I'm sure we have that somewhere. Right, Sophia?" The agent turned to him. "Mr. Blackstone, what's your security clearance level?" "My clearance level? For federal contracting work? Secret? Top secret? What level background investigation have you completed?" Austin blinked. I filled out some forms when I started." "That's not a clearance level." She made a note. "Have you completed the required 40-hour federal acquisition certification course?" "The what now?" I watched from the back as Austin's confidence crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. The agent pulled out a thick folder. "According to our records, Walter Garrison remains the only authorized contracting officer on this file. No reassignment was ever filed or approved." She looked directly at Sophia. "That means every action taken under this contract for the past 8 days has been unauthorized." Sophia's face went pale. "Unauthorized? What does that mean exactly?" "It means this $350 million contract is now frozen pending investigation. All payments suspended. All deliverables quarantined. And your company faces potential penalties for operating under voided authority." The room went dead quiet. I could hear the air conditioning humming. "How much in penalties?" Sophia whispered. "Minimum 2 million, maximum depends on how much was processed illegally." The agent closed her folder. "We'll need all documentation from the past 8 days. Every invoice, every communication, every decision made under this contract." Austin looked like he was going to be sick. "Can we fix this? File the paperwork now. You can't backdate federal compliance, son." The agent stood. "This investigation will take 6 to 8 weeks minimum. Your operations under this contract are suspended immediately." That's when the CEO burst in, red-faced and sweating. He'd gotten the emergency call from legal 20 minutes too late. "What's the situation here?" he demanded. The agent handed him a document. "Your company removed a federal contracting officer without proper reassignment. That's a compliance violation that triggered automatic audit review." The CEO read the paper twice. His face changed from confusion to horror to pure rage. He turned slowly toward Sophia. "You removed Walt without filing federal paperwork? I thought it was just internal." "Internal?" His voice echoed off the conference room walls. "This is a defense contract." I watched the whole scene unfold with the calm satisfaction of someone who'd spent 18 years building systems specifically designed to prevent this exact disaster. Austin was hyperventilating. Sophia was trying to explain herself to a CEO who looked ready to throw her out the window. Legal was frantically typing on their phones, probably calling every attorney they knew. The agent gathered her materials. "Mr. Garrison, you'll need to resume your duties immediately while we sort this out. Your clearance never lapsed." I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. My files are ready." 6 months later, the company paid $3.2 million in fines. Sophia was terminated. Austin went back to his business degree, and I got the corner office I should have had years ago, along with a 15% raise and a formal apology from the board. Sometimes the best revenge is just being right while watching other people learn they were wrong the hard way.